You want to break this bill down for us? Because I think people should be concerned about this bill passing. And it, of course, certainly shows just how radical the Democrats are.
Yeah, so when this was relatively early in the session when this bill was introduced, and when they introduce bills, as you well know, Jeremy, we get a list of like the summary of what the bill does. And in this case, the summary of what the bill does is, and I quote because I'm reading directly from it, a bill relating to crime, repealing the crime of the transfer of an infectious agent for a communicable disease from one person who knowingly harbors the agent to another. And so you read that language and your mind immediately goes to the transmission of HIV or AIDS, right? That's what this is presumably targeted at repealing is the transmission of AIDS knowingly from one person to another being a crime. And so those were the terms in which we were thinking about it and talking about it, and even just on that basis it's horrendous, right? The idea that somebody who is HIV positive or suffering from AIDS and knows that that's the case is going to engage in behavior, sexual conduct, that or otherwise. I mean, I suppose you could inject somebody, knowingly transmit that disease to somebody else, right? That's just complete. That should be a crime. That is an assault on someone's body to do that. But the counter argument was, and as I discussed this with some people and even some members, the counter argument was, well, a lot has changed since the 1980s. HIV isn't the same disease that it once was. There's been tremendous advances and strides in treatment that makes it much less lethal and much more chronic and something that you're able to live with persistently and indefinitely than it ever was before. It's another way of putting it is it's not as big of a deal as it used to be. And so we sort of, and there's been no movement, by the way, on this that I'm aware of in the legislature. I don't see this bill getting a hearing. I mean, maybe it will, but I think that'll be very nuts if it does, especially after what we're about to disclose here. But that was kind of fell by the wayside, right? Because that's part of the thing that's going on here at the Capitol is things are happening so quickly and it's such rapid fire that you don't have time to react. You don't have time to really dig down into the details and see what it is that they're actually proposing. And so this has kind of fallen away as something that we haven't really been thinking about or looking at, not taking seriously because it's not moving through committees. It's not something that people are talking about. Well, you and I, in casual conversation here before the show, started talking about it. And so I looked up the actual bill. And all the bill does is it just repeals a section of law. It repeals a section of Minnesota statutes, section 609.2241. So what is that? Well, you Google it and it pops up. 609.2241 is a section of law that deals with the knowing transfer of communicable diseases. Now, I'm going to read this to you, okay? And bear with me because it's very important to understand what's going on here. The definition of a communicable disease means a disease or condition that causes serious illness, serious disability, or death. The infectious agent of which may pass or be carried from the body of one person to the body of another through direct transmission. And then it goes on to define direct transmission. Means predominantly sexual or bloodborne transmission. Okay. And then a person who knowingly harbors an infectious agent is defined as a person who receives from a physician or other health professional advice that the person harbors an infectious agent for a communicable disease, educational information about behavior which might transmit the infectious agent, and instruction of practical means of preventing such transmission. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about somebody who has been informed from a health professional that they have a communicable disease, how it's transmitted, and practical instruction on how to prevent such means of transmission. Okay, so that's the person who this statute is directed against. Somebody who knows that they have an infectious disease that causes serious illness, serious disability, or death. All right, and it goes on to make it a crime for one person who knowingly harbors an infectious agent to transfer that infectious agent to someone else. And so the argument that HIV is highly treatable now, and it's not that big of a deal. If that were true, if it were true that HIV is not a big deal in 2023, then by my reading, this statute wouldn't apply. Because to me, not a big deal is less than serious illness, serious disability, or death, right? That's what this statute covers. This statute covers somebody who has an infectious disease that is known to cause serious illness, serious disability, or death, and then knowingly transmits that to another person. If HIV doesn't fall into that category, then this statute doesn't apply. So why would you want to repeal it?
Yeah, and it's important also that the transfer of this, because I read the bill, I got wound up about it because I thought it was just so egregious to remove this part of our law. And then I started thinking, well, let me put my other hat on here and say, well, what if this would apply to COVID? Could this apply to COVID? And you read through it, and because it isn't transferred by blood or sexual transmission, when we talk about the crime, the crime is actually sharing of non-sterile syringes or needles for the purpose of injecting drugs, the transfer of blood, sperm, sexual penetration with another person without having first informed the other person that you have a communicable disease. So that doesn't apply to COVID. This was written specific for HIV or for other very serious diseases. And this is a time where affirmative consent has been taught for a generation, where everything is affirmed before you have consenting sex. This is removing this as a crime, and it's really I think a step way too far.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I say, you can't give these people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's what even I and a lot of our other members did when we first saw this bill. Is at first we were horrified just at the premise, but then we kind of thought about it and tried to give Representative Finke the benefit of the doubt that there might be some good motive here. But by a plain reading of the statute that the representative is attempting to repeal, I can't conceive of a good motive for this. I don't understand why you would want to be able to willfully transmit a infectious disease that's known to cause serious illness, serious disability, or death.